Hi, everybody. Jag är Cher Earlsman Initiate, touching English lingo but anti Bashushin. This is Lana A. Dashache Doto Hana A. Dashanella. I am from Kenta, Arizona. I am a junior going into my senior year in the Bachelor's of Arts and Psychology program at Dinek College. I am doing my presentation on understanding anxiety and depression in the LGBTQ community. Let me pull up my slideshow right here for you. And we can start this presentation. So my title is Understanding Anxiety and Depression in the LGBTQ Community. Understanding anxiety and depression is coping with minority stress. It does not tell the full story in the lives of the LGBTQ community. There is really way more to each person's life other than pride, strength, and sense of belonging, which are found in communities such as your family and friends, the love of other LGBTQ people, and our supportive allies that we have made along the way. And as all of us, whether gay, straight, or cisgender, or no preference at all, um, are more than a constellation of the difficulties that we've had to face. And what I mean by minority stress, it's really dealing with the persistent prejudice and discrimination that any minority has to deal with throughout their lives. And sometimes it can be a positive effect or a negative impact on our mental health as the LGBTQ community. So some numbers that I had found, about 60% of the LGBTQ people deal with anxiety and depression at some point in their lives. And that rate is really, as written on my PowerPoint, is 1.5 to 2.5 times higher than that of their straight or gender conforming counterparts. It is a high number and it definitely raises a lot of questions. And that's the reason why I wanted to do my presentation on this. While the full answer is undoubtedly complicated as to why you or your LGBTQ loved one are more to struggle with anxiety and depression, here's where context is key in understanding um, for yourself or for the person that you love that is LGBTQ. So one of the important risk factors of LGBTQ mental health is actually their coming out story. And the reason why I say that first is because it either leaves a positive change in their life or a negative change in their life. And it shifts their acceptance in their life. And, not all people come out as soon as they know. It takes time. It takes an immense amount of time to share their identity or their sexual orientation to all the people that they love and their friends and family and their environment really. And then the next point is the fear of rejection. Now, the fear of rejection coming out can be difficult or a very traumatic event in their lives, but it can be difficult to cope with because you don't want to be rejected by your family. You don't want to be rejected by your friends. And, sometimes it even affects your workplace or if you're very religious, it affects the religious aspect of your life. And culturally, it is one big thing, especially in the Native American community. And then the next is trauma. Trauma really, it can really be previous, something you're dealing with right now, and may cause effect in your future because, you know, being homophobic, biphobic, um, transphobic, and also dealing with the bullying and feelings of identity-based shame is very traumatic for um, the LGBTQ community, and that forms the sense of anxiety and depression in their lives. And sometimes that can lead to discrimination in like labeling, stereotyping, denial of opportunities for their life, and it creates sometimes it creates hate crime, and hate crime is really one thing that we're really dealing with right now in this world. Next is substance use, and I feel that this is an important risk factor for mental health because sometimes, like in the Native American community, especially, it's misused, overused, and it's used as a coping mechanism for, those mental health factors that they are facing in their lives. And it's really hard to explain that aspect only because it either comes from them coming out to their family or the rejection or trauma that they had faced or that they are facing. And I think those are the primary reasons why people turn to, especially the LGBTQ community, turn to substance abuse. Next is homelessness. I believe that homelessness is one of the biggest thing in um, the LGBTQ community because of all the previous factors in their lives. Either family did not accept, or they don't have the means to provide for themselves because of um, them being um, part of the LGBTQ community. The big one I feel that is huge is suicide. Suicide, many people in the LGBTQ community struggle with it, and they struggle in silence. And sometimes it worsens their health. And they really are at a higher risk for it. Next is inadequate healthcare. And this is primarily because, as I previously mentioned, their sexual orientation or how they identify themselves in the LGBTQ community. And sometimes mental health care often group together anyone that's from the LGBTQ community, and this creates, different challenges, and sometimes even raises the mental illness that the person is experiencing in their life. Next, my next slide is understanding their stories. And by this, I mean understanding LGBTQ stories. The first story that I gathered was a friend of mine. She knew she was lesbian her whole life. She grew up knowing that. And as she was graduating high school, her family wasn't really accepting because of their strong Navajo background. They just didn't understand it. They had no education of it. They weren't educated about their daughter, their granddaughter, their sister being lesbian. And because of that, when she finally graduated high school, she moved to the city. She moved down south, and she went to school. But while she was in school, she fell into substance abuse and depression. And that's kind of what took over most of her life. It was about 3, 4 years of her life when she realized that this is not the person who she was, and she needed to reconnect to her roots to finally feel, hopefully she can feel accepted by her family. But in this case, when she went home, when she came back to the reservation, her grandmother was the only person that talked to her. And they talked and talked and talked. And she explained to her grandmother that the reason why her grandmother knew is because she grew up with somebody like that in her life. And she understood um, what it is to be female and male. And her grandmother accepted her and basically saved her life. And I'm happy to say that she's living a beautiful life. She graduated school. She's reconnecting with her family, and she's doing way much better. And it was really her cultural background and her grandmother who really saved her from herself, from this time in her life that where nobody wanted to do anything with her. And then I have another story. Sorry, I think I'm having technical difficulties right here. Um, this story is about myself. Um, I knew I was gay my whole life. And the beautiful thing about that was that my family and friends accepted who I was. Nobody had a problem because maybe because they knew, maybe because I told them, but they accepted who I was. And just like my friend who struggled with substance abuse, I did too. But it didn't happen because of me coming out. It happened because I was not home. I was on the reservation. I was surrounded by people who didn't accept me for being, Native American and gay. They didn't understand my story and where I came from. And for those 2 years, until I finished my certification program, I was dealing with that. And I realized that I needed to be back home. And I realized that, my life doesn't have to be like this. And so I came home and I found myself. I found myself in through my cultural roots, through my family, through my friends, through the people that knew me. But overall, I'm doing well. I have good people and good friends, and I'm continuing to grow my network and my life, and I'm doing very well with that. My next slide, I want to bring up how important the term being two spirited is. And being two spirited people, being two spirited people, um, we must be able to navigate multiple cultures and community, including our own family, our own tribe, the LGBTQ, two spirited groups, and just this society at large, because we have to figure out, we have to let people know who we are and where we come from. They have to understand who we are and where we come from. And we have to navigate through those channels. And I know that probably one thing has to do with another, but the overall meaning of that is that in order to know who we are, we have to know where we come from. And when people know who we are and where we come from, they understand our terms and who we are as a person and where we come from as a person. And it is important to know not all Native people identify themselves as two spirited. Some Native people identify them just as, general terms as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer. And in the LGBT community, it's like that. But being two spirited is a relatively new term, which came up in the early 1990s, I believe. And not all tribes use that term. I believe 130 different Native American tribes use the term two spirited. And the term two spirited is used currently to reconnect with tribal traditions related to sexuality and gender identity, to transcend the Eurocentric binary categorization of homosexuality versus heterosexuality. And that's the basic terms of being two spirited. And it was an Ojibwa medicine man that came up with that term because he wanted to prove and show the world that, being two spirited, you come from half your mom and half your dad, half female and half male. And that's how Navajo see it as well. We see it as being, we are half our mom and half our dad. And that's the true meaning of being two spirited. And my next slide is how can we help? How can we help somebody that is in the LGBTQ community and dealing with anxiety and depression? Um, just like any normal person, you give support in the way that you would give it to anybody. You show support the best way you can. And I believe that listening, being an active listener, is a good way to start. And, most of the time, people that are in these situations just need an ear. And another is asking how you can help, because not all people are educated on the LGBTQ community. So asking how you can help them in any way, shape, or form is probably one of the best ways you can do that. And it is important that we always show respect, regardless if it's LGBTQ or not, and accepting them or accepting any person through our words and actions and understanding why they are dealing with these mental health issues. And then reflecting the person's language. And what I mean by that is how they identify themselves. Do they identify themselves as he or she or they? Or sometimes they don't have a preference. So, it's really good to know that language and how they identify themselves and how they identify their partners in that type of situation if they have one. Asking open ended questions. That's probably in any situation. But the more open ended questions you ask, the better in understanding what the person is going through. But sometimes you want to be careful in how you say things. You, or how you ask questions. You just want to be simple, listening, understanding, and caring. And one of the things that my family um, went through is educating themselves on how they could be a good ally, because I do have nieces and nephews that are part of the LGBTQ community, and I believe being a good ally and understanding where are they coming from gives you this light that you probably never seen before. Okay, I think my next slide froze. I'm sorry. So I have a YouTube link on here. This YouTube link is from I'm trying to remember her name. May Chapaway. She's actually a Native American leader and author who explains her side of being two-spirited. It's very beautiful. If you want to know more information, you can go to that link and listen to it. It's very beautiful the way she explains it. And I want to leave you with my quote, how I feel being two-spirited, and how I dealt with my depression and my anxiety, and maybe how you can help somebody who is two-spirited in that sense, or just anybody in the LGBTQ community. And my quote is, "The world is transforming towards the integration of masculine and feminine energy. Being a two-spirited person is a key for building a healthier world between Western society and our world. We we are a bridge in a fragmented society." And I just want to thank you guys so much for listening and participating in my presentation on understanding anxiety and depression in the LGBTQ community. Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in.